Hey everyone, Margarita here. I want to talk a little bit in this video about how my mom was able to manipulate my dad long term and use him as her enabler throughout the course of all these decades, beginning with the time that the trust was left for me, all the way to the current day. Um, so there's going to be several videos that give some supporting information on a lot of the next few videos. So I'm going to repeat some of the same things in each videos because not everybody watches every video. But initially, even before the trust was left for me, my mom was already making up lies about me to all of her family members and my dad in advance of this ever happening. And it was because I confronted her about poisoning batches of food. And she had to make sure that I didn't tell anybody because I kept threatening to tell on her. And then as I was threatening to tell on her and she continued to lie to everybody, she would repeatedly pull me aside and beat the shit out of me when nobody was around. She would do it behind my dad's back because I'm an only child and there was never anybody in my home and my dad was at work a lot. There's a lot of times I was left alone with her. And because all of my grandparents, except for one at that time, had been deceased, so her parents had been gone since before I was ever born. So there was nobody overseeing her behavior at any point along the way. That's another issue, and that plays a key role in how else she was able to carry this out long term. And then once I started school, that's where the lies and the delusional phone call placing started with all of my teachers because she had to make sure that I didn't tell anybody what she was doing at home. So that all started before the trust was left. And then she had to tell my dad different lies about me. And it wasn't as extravagant until after the trust was left, but she had to make sure that he never believed anything I was saying because of how I was threatening to tell on her for poisoning the food. And then at one point, I did try to tell her sister when I was about 5, but I didn't understand the terms for what she was doing. I didn't understand the word narcissist or narcissism or narcissistic abuse. I didn't understand the term gaslighting or reactive abuse or any of this stuff. Munchausen by proxy, none of it. I didn't even know these terms until I was in probably 9th or 10th grade when I took a psychology class, and these terms were all in that book, where that's when the light bulb started to come on and I began to figure out what she had been doing. And then at that point I had confronted her again. So that also amplified her behavior at that time as well. And shortly after that is when she managed to get me kicked out of high school. So along the way, she was already lying to everybody because of that situation initially. And she would keep control over me by beating the shit out of me repeatedly. And even if we were, because she has hundreds of family members, hundreds of friends. So if we were in a place where I could tell somebody else because I didn't have anybody to tell around me ever, she had such control that there was nobody to tell except for my dad. And she made sure that I wouldn't say anything to my dad because she made me believe that he knew she was acting this way toward me. And she would threaten me with things that he would do to me, although that was never real. He actually didn't know anything about it. She made me believe that he did, and he was never going to do any of those things she was saying. It was just a way to keep control over me so that I wouldn't tell him. But she abused me so much that I never even attempted to try to tell him because of what she made me believe. I didn't even think he would believe me, or I didn't think I could tell him. And so when all this began, where it became amplified is as soon as the trust was left for me. So I was probably in about, I want to say I was about 7 years old at this time. I know I said before, I think I was 5 or 6. I was actually 7. So I've been piecing together quite a bit of information this past month or two. I mean, I've been piecing everything together about 7 years, very heavily. And 5 of those years, a lot of this information was acquired in person through all of the people and agencies she had physically harassing me and causing problems in my life directly in my face and in my life. In the last 2 years, since I've been working on the damage to the house, which is also fallout of her crimes, I've been gathering information paperwork wise, in many different avenues of paperwork. So I was able to locate some documents, and I do know I was left this money in the year 1991. So I would have been about 7 years old in that year. So I have located some paperwork, and I will talk about that in the next video. But what it was is, once the money was left for me, and I was already, trying to tell people something, even though I didn't know what to say. She knew she had to come up with something more extravagant to keep me under further control, because she intended on this money going in her pocket from day one, from the time it was left for me. She never once intended on it going to me. So she came up with numerous ways to grow a false narrative about me, manipulate every person around her. And then once I got a little older, she began manipulating agencies and many different agencies and companies. And she grew it from there all the way to the current day. And then how she was able to manipulate my dad along the way was the fact that she poisoned food. So she began doing it more regularly. And then what she would do, because the poison in the food long term, it was causing like this disconnect where thought processing wasn't working properly. I do remember that. And I realized this in 2019 when I had a lot of memories come back, and when she also had my dad dump a tote off full of stuff that she had either saved, acquired. She was trying to grow evidence of some sort with things. She was going through my room and taking things, or she was coming into my numerous houses and stealing things, convincing my dad to give her the keys because she wasn't allowed in any of my houses. And all this stuff showed up in a tote here at my house in 2019. So what she was doing, because I read some of the notes and some of the things I wrote at that time, that's how I'm able to piece this together and realize what I was thinking and how things were going, and the effects that it had on me at that time. So this was more recent that I had acquired some of this information and realized the bigger picture. But what it was doing, it was causing a disconnect with thought processing. And again, I don't know the substances that she uses, but I do know it's more than one substance. And I do believe it's changed over the course of time. Minimally, I believe it's two, but it could be more than that. And so she would do this more regularly. She would tap her fork on the plate and scrape her plate with her fork, kind of like that movie, I think it's called Get Out, with the lady and the teacup and the spoon. It's something similar to that, but she was doing it with a fork and her plate. And what she would do is she would repeat delusions about me to my dad in front of me at the dinner table while she was scraping her fork and her plate, with the poisoned food in the batches of food for dinner every night. And initially, it used to be the food at dinner. I don't think she was poisoning additional things. I mean, she could have been, but I'm pretty sure it was just at dinner every night. And then it grew from there as times changed and stuff shifted. And I started working in restaurants at age 14. And then I moved out on my own at 18. She had to find different ways to get it into the food. So that's where it became being random batches of food and other things as well. It wasn't just dinner anymore because I was no longer there. There's no contact, no relationship. So it changed over the course of time, but initially it was dinner every night. She began repeating delusions to him, about me. She was telling him things that I did all day, or so-and-so told her I did this, or I did that, or my teachers told her this and that. And I don't believe, in the beginning, I don't believe anybody actually told her anything. And I don't believe there was a conversation that ever happened. I think she just made it up initially. And he would be sitting there at the dinner table and we both be sitting there, but because she had so much control over me, and if I were to try to speak up or say something or defend myself, she would then wait for him to be gone when it would be the two of us, and she would continue to just beat the shit out of me. And the way she would storm around in silence, stewing and brewing the dark thoughts in her head, dragging her feet across the floor, you could tell that she was always in this deranged, angry mode. And it was extremely disturbing to sit even in the next room, even if there was no words ever coming out of her mouth. So she would then go back and forth, like, just basically she was like a ticking time bomb. And even if I said one word, she would come in and beat the shit out of me. So if I were to try to defend myself after she would say this stuff to my dad, if I were to speak up right then and there, she would just argue. I never tried, but if I did, she would have tried to argue back and forth and say how I'm always lying. See, I'm still lying. It wouldn't have mattered because that's what would have happened if I would have said something. But I didn't, because I already knew what she was stewing and brewing to do. So the second he left, she would have just kept beating the shit out of me, and she made my life extremely miserable. She took away every friend I ever had. By the time I moved out, I only was allowed to have the one friend who I'm still in contact with today. I was only allowed to have the one friend. She took every single person away from me. And then uh, so that's why I never said anything. But because the second she walked away, or the second, we all dispersed, or the next day, let's say I'd said something at dinner that night after she repeated all these delusions to him. The next day, she'd wait till we're alone, before my dad would get home from work. She'd beat the shit out of me, and then tell me how I'm going to have such a miserable life and how nobody's ever going to believe me. And then she'd laugh like a deranged lunatic. So that laugh she has, when she laughs like that, she sounds like a deranged lunatic. I'm not sure how nobody ever noticed this, but she does it in front of everybody. That laugh means she just told a bunch of lies or delusions, or she's coming up with the next one to tell you. And she does it all the time. She still does it all the time today. And I don't even think she realizes that she's laughing like a deranged lunatic. But she would then beat the shit out of me the next day. She would be walking around like a ticking time bomb. I wasn't allowed to say anything or move or do anything, because she was still just waiting to beat the shit out of me if I tried to say something. So she stayed in this manner every night, pretty much. It was almost every night. And I had to live that way. And nobody ever realized that that was my life. And that's how I was being forced to live without help from anybody. And then because my dad worked longer hours, I was there alone with her pretty much for a period of time every night. So there was no getting around it because I was stuck with her. And so she just continued to repeat the delusions about me every night at dinner going forward, pretty much every night for some years. And then once I got a little bit older and she thought I was going to be telling my teachers, that's where she started placing delusional phone calls to all of my teachers in the background at the very beginning of every school year. That's where it started, to make sure that if I did tell them, they didn't believe me. And then I figured this out in sixth grade when I had Mr. Hammett. And at Bates Elementary in Woodhaven, I had Mr. Hammett. And he got to know me the year prior because I would leave Latchkey and go help him like grade papers or hang stuff up or clean stuff up in his room, just to be alone and away from other people, because other people were disturbing to me because of what I had to deal with all the time. So I went down there the year prior, and she didn't know that he got to know me. And I spent quite a bit of time with him after school, and she never realized that. So when I had him as a teacher the following year and she called him with this bullshit, when he pulled me aside at the very beginning of the school year and said what she says to every teacher every year, and he could tell by like how uncomfortable I got and my reaction by what he said. He could tell that I wasn't lying. And when I said she's lying, and he said, why would she lie? And I said, I don't know. She does it all the time. But he could tell by my reaction and the way I started to shake and the way I started to look, and the fact that he had gotten to know me for like the previous year. He knew that I wasn't the one lying. So he dropped it and he never brought it up. But it was that situation that made me realize how she was able to get away with doing this to all of the teachers throughout the course of time. So when the teachers were narcissists, that's where they jumped on board and they helped too, and they helped participate in this, and they all got off on it. And then at times there was years where the entire students would jump in, and I would just be extremely harassed all throughout the course of every school day, and then go home to the same bullshit, the same her repeating delusions to my dad. And then, not able to do my homework at home, because she would be dragging her feet around the floor in the kitchen in the next room, and I wouldn't be able to get any work done because she was walking around like a ticking time bomb, ready to beat the shit out of me at any given moment should I say one word. And then she knew she was lying about me. So some of the times at dinner, I did try to say, like, no, that's not what happened, or like I minimally tried to say something a few times, but that's where she would grow into an even bigger ticking time bomb. So I stopped saying something at all. So her behavior was like that every night, or on the weekend if I was stuck with her on the weekend because he was at work. It didn't matter. I was forced to be left alone with her. So in order to save myself, because I was in 100% survival mode all the time, I stopped saying anything at all. But then I had to stay in that state for no, you gotta go. I had to stay in that state for a very long time. Um, and it got to the point where I could no longer do schoolwork because once it traveled to where she was able to get the teachers to harass me and then the students followed along, I couldn't do my work in class. I was being harassed all day at school, and then I'd go home and I'd be harassed at home and abused at home. And there was no break from it, to the point where I couldn't concentrate to get not one thing done, and none of my work was getting done, and it's because of what she was doing. And then she'd call the teachers and act like I did this or I did that, or I'm so bad and I'm all these things. Well, it's because of what she was doing. And then when I go to school and the kids and the teachers are harassing me, it's because of her delusional phone call placing, and they're harassing me based on what she's telling them, and they believe her. So I stayed in a continuous state that way, where I could never get anything done. um, and there was no way around it. And it was all due to the trust being left for me and her intending on getting her hands on it. So when we'd present in front of other people, when I had an opportunity to try to tell somebody, she'd get even more controlling and more of a ticking time bomb, more out of control. So if I tried to say one thing to anybody, that's where she'd drag me off to the bathroom and beat the shit out of me in public. And then when I'd come out, because now these people all know her, and I'm wondering why nobody's helping me or why nobody's addressing the situation or stopping her, I'd come out screaming and crying, and she portrayed it. This was a gaslighting and reactive abuse situation as well, on top of extreme physical, mental, and emotional abuse. So I'd come out screaming and crying, still wondering why nobody's trying to help me. And it's because she was portraying it to look like I'm just this problem child and I have all these problems and this mental disorder. And really, everything was 100% caused by her behavior. And so nobody ever stepped in, nobody ever helped. Every time I tried to say something to anybody, no matter where we were, because she liked to go a lot of places, and be this socialite, and like, you know, this whiny bratty kid doesn't fit her agenda, on top of the fact that she needs me to look like a whiny bratty kid so she can get access to this trust fund long term, because she was already plotting this out as I was still in elementary school. Nobody ever tried to stop her. Nobody understood what I was trying to say. I wasn't allowed to get enough words in for somebody to understand what I was trying to say. And then I didn't have the vocabulary to describe what was going on. This is long before social media, and she controlled the flow of information. How would I understand what to call this behavior? So she did this every step of the way, all the way until she got me kicked out of high school fraudulently by getting pills in my possession that should have never been prescribed to me, and then using the Brownstown, Michigan Police Department to put fraudulent charges on me, and there should have never been any charges. And that's how she ended up getting me kicked out of high school. And she attempted numerous times. She attempted with a bomb threat, or it was either a bomb threat or she said we were planning on shooting up the school, one of the two, the year prior to that, and it didn't work. So she carried on with the next agenda the year after, and that did work. So she carried this out all along the way. By then, I had already been working for a few years. I already knew at age 10 I was planning to leave. I had already had my good job for about a year at that point, and then the following years when I purchased my first home, and I already knew that's where I was going with it, because once I was kicked out of school and I got my first taste of real money, once I worked 40 hours, because I was already making $500 a week working 3 shifts. And then once I started working 40 hours, I made adult money right away. I was making $900,000 a week. So that's how I got my first home when I turned 18. So I already had it planned, because I couldn't get through each day because of what she was doing. But really what she was doing every evening, all the way up until I started working in restaurants at age 14. So it was like I was almost 15. So 14, almost 15. I worked regularly enough. And then I got 2 work permits when I turned 16, because I already had my first car paid for. So I got 2 work permits, and I worked 2 jobs so I could work double time so I could get out of there quicker. And then I wasn't home as much double time, so I wasn't eating as much of the food or sitting there at dinner time double time. So once it reached that point, I wasn't in front of my dad while she's doing this anymore. I was just glad to be gone, not really realizing that she was still doing that without me there, just repeating all these delusions to him every day. Just I wasn't there to see it. And then it wasn't until probably 2019, after I had the brain injuries and I was fully piecing everything together and all my memories started coming back. That's where I fully realized that that never stopped. As soon as I moved out at 18, the delusion repeating at the dinner table between the two of them, it never stopped. She kept it on going the entire time, from literally from the day the trust was left all the way. I'm sure it's still going on today in the current day at the care facility where my dad is. It just never stopped. And because she was able to carry this out long term, and he never realized that those were all delusions, and everything she's saying has never been real. The person she's portraying me to be, the things she's saying I've been doing. And she changed these delusions over the course of time, added some more stuff to it, and then would always reinforce it with, oh, you know how she is. You know how she is. No, that's her repeating delusions over and over and over and over for decades. So he never realized that none of that stuff was real. He never realized that there's been no contact, no relationship all these decades, which makes no sense why it never clicked for him that these things she's still saying all this time later has never been real. Where would she get any information about me when there's no contact, no relationship? She knows nothing about me. She has no information on me. She hasn't in a very long time. And even when she did have information about me, it wasn't even reality. That's stuff she made up. Those are delusions. So it never dawned on him all along the way that every night when she's repeating delusions to him and she's getting him to operate on her delusions, that none of it was ever real. And now I do have proof of this because I have a lot of screenshots of his texts to me at different time frames, basically from the time I became injured in 2018 to the time of his injury in 2023. I have quite a few screenshots and texts because you could tell when she was repeating delusions to him because he would text them to me. He would call me and say these strange things. He would cause chaos within my household. She'd repeat delusions to him and get him to come pick up my older two kids and bring them back to her so she could repeat delusions to all of them. And it was causing extreme chaos and extreme disruptions within my household while I was fighting to stay alive, and I couldn't have sound. My brain was sagging and swelling, and I was in a continuous extreme state, going through daily treatment, treating an inpatient injury on an outpatient basis. That's what she was doing during that time very heavily. And then once I told him what she was doing in 2019, it amplified because I told him the truth. And then he brought that truth back to her. And then she re-brainwashed him and reinforced the delusions even heavier and went 100 times overboard with it going forward, manipulating him and my kids against me to make sure that they believed I always had a mental disorder and what they were seeing was not a physical injury. When here I'm just fighting to get through each day, fighting to stay alive. I'm literally incapacitated, can't do anything but barely get to treatment and barely get back. And she's repeating so many delusions that everybody in my household was screaming for about 3 years, but very heavily for about a little over 12 months. It was very extreme to the point where I just didn't think I was going to survive anymore because my brain couldn't heal because of the amount of screaming of the delusions going on in my house. But it was my dad who was picking up my kids and bringing my kids back to my mother so she could repeat the delusions. And he was told many times they were not allowed over there. That had been a rule for some time since the 2013 escapade. They had not been allowed over there regularly. And here he was going behind my back, taking them over there. And I knew that because of the delusions that were being repeated and screamed at me when they were brought back. Then here was my dad getting pumped up full of these delusions. And he would text me certain things and he would say certain things. So I could probably do a different video on what those things are, because you can tell by what he's saying to me in these texts that she's pumping him up full of delusions. Because he was making comments about, I don't know, you could tell that she told him I hang out with low-life losers who break into my house and steal. You could tell she said something about the way I make my money or who I am as a person, because when I said something about like I build success or I make investments or I build success or whatever, and he was like, well, if that were true, you'd be living in Farmington Hills in a big old house. Well, that's delusional because I do live in a big old house. I live in a $400,000 house. That's delusional. You could tell that she was repeating things to him so he wouldn't believe my reality and what I really have going on, how much money I really make, how many streams of income I've had along the way, what's really been going on. You can tell that she was repeating things to him. And then something at one point, he said something about how much money did you lose in crypto? Like he was being sarcastic, joking about it because she's repeating more delusions to him. And I said, nothing. What are you talking about? And so it was numerous things. So I have these texts. I was screenshotting them all during that time because I knew this was evidence to what was going on, and I couldn't address any of this because I was so close to death, so sick. So I just kept taking screenshots of all these messages at that time because I knew this was going to be part of the evidence and what's all been going on all these years down the line. So I do have some of these things, but what was going on is he was coming into my house and causing extreme disruptions, trying to snatch my kids because she'd be at home repeating these delusions, how he needs to come get my daughter and he's got to get her out of that house. And that's what she's repeating to him in a stern, extreme manner. And so he'd drive all the way over here and walk in and steal my daughter up out of my house. And she's screaming delusions because now this has been going on for some years at this point. And they're both screaming delusions. And he's trying to take her out of here when I'm saying she's not allowed to leave with you. She cannot go to your house. She is not allowed to go over there with your wife. And so this was going on in a very extreme manner. It stayed happening repeatedly. The cops had to be called numerous times. And when I was trying to tell them that this is a deranged lunatic, she's been doing this for decades, that my kids are not allowed over there, and that she has not been allowed in any of my houses in over 2 decades, that she does all this from behind the scenes because they said, oh, well, she won't be coming over here. We talked to them on the phone. And I said, she doesn't come over here. You're missing the point. You're missing the problem and what's going on. She's never been allowed in any of my houses. She does all this from behind the scenes and repeats delusions to everybody. And so the cops were not comprehending what I was saying. They kept getting called during all this time. There was probably 50 calls to the cops during this 3-year time period where I'm fighting to stay alive. And the cops are showing up because my daughter's acting a fool, because my mother pumped her up full of delusions, pumping my dad up full of delusions, and making it look like, or making them all believe that she has some type of rights to my kids, or my dad has rights to my daughter, or my mom has rights to either one of my kids. That's not reality. None of that was reality. At the same time, she's calling my city's police department. She's calling her city's police department, and she's making them believe that she's always raised them. She has control over everything, and she's got custody of them and raised them, and she calls all the shots, and they're supposed to be there. And these cops were helping her do all this. So this went on in a very extreme manner. The delusion repeating to my dad, and how my dad helped carry out some of these crimes and some of these escapades, because he played a role in the 2013 escapades. She's the one who got him to write the checks for the attorneys to snatch both of my kids from each one of help each father snatch the child from me to get them in her possession, because she needed to gain access to the missing stolen trust fund. And that's how she went about doing it. She used my dad. She made him write the checks, but at the same time, she was getting money from the attorney's office that's holding my missing stolen trust fund. And she was making my dad pay the bill, but then she was getting money from them and pocketing it for herself. But at the same time, she used my dad to back her up, because each escapade would go on, she would repeat all these delusions to him in an extreme manner. She'd be like, no, you know what she did. Oh, she did this, she did that. You know how she is. And that's how she would be saying it to him, to where she would be reinforcing this false narrative so strongly in his head that he would have to do what she's saying, because now he believes it, and this has been going on my entire life, that he would just do what he's told and believe that, oh, you know, she's always been on drugs. You know, she talks to losers, and that's what she's doing. And so then he'd show up, he'd pay the attorney. He snatched my daughter in 2013. He's the one who showed up. She's long gone. She's not even there. She got my daughter's dad to sign the paper. She got the Brownstown police to believe her. She got my dad to take off work, serve me the court papers at the school where she had a cheer camp, got him to snatch her from me illegally by using this attorney to print all this fake shit about me, and got my daughter's dad to show up there in the middle of being at work and stand there because he's the father. You can't do this without the other parent. He hasn't been a parent in her life in the previous 9 years. She was 9 years old. He hadn't been a parent in her life in the previous 9 years, has no idea what's going on. And he's helping this deranged lunatic pull this escapade off just by standing there. So they pulled all that off. My dad's the one who helped. And he believes that what he's doing is right because he's believing all the delusions that my mother had been repeating to him. That's just one of the escapades. Now, during my injury, this went on many times during my injury, where he's showing up at my house, doing this repeatedly, trying to snatch my kids from my house. And at the time, part of the agenda was to make sure that she was turning my kids against me and my dad against me, to make sure They believed that I was never injured to the degree that me and my son were that injured, and how sick we were and how near death we were. And part of this was to make sure I had no support system and to make sure I had nobody to watch my younger son, because I was still under daily treatment, whereas his had tapered off a little bit. He wasn't under daily treatment, but he was still treating a couple times a week at on the second, or no, the third year of treatment. He was already treating like 2 days a week at that point, and I was still treating 5 days. So on the days that he wasn't treating, I needed somebody to watch him. Well, she kept repeating to my daughter how she's not supposed to help me, and how it's my job to watch my kid and it's not her job to babysit, and she's not supposed to help me. And she's repeating this shit to my daughter to make her act a fool. So I have no support system, so that I cannot get to treatment. And part of the reason for this was so that way I would not survive. Because at that time, I was still in an extreme fight for my life, still not knowing if I was going to live, extremely fragile. My brain was extremely fragile. My system was extremely fragile. I was quite a ways away from being able to drop down to weekly treatments or be in the place that I needed to be. Because at that time, I was probably about 3 to 4 years of daily treatment away from where I needed to be. And so that was still needed going forward, and it couldn't stop. And I knew it was an extremely fragile situation. And she knew that because she prevented the initial medical emergency from being treated when it became a medical emergency. So she was pulling all this off to make sure that I could not get to treatment. So that way I would die, so she could collect on the rest of the missing stolen trust fund. That's what she was going for. And to make sure everybody is screaming delusions at me so I don't have a support system. So all of my life, I had no support system. I did not have a proper support system. I had different sets of people at a distance at different times, but I never had a proper support system. And she was always causing these escapades and getting my dad to help her participate in these escapades by repeating so many delusions to him that he would just do what she's telling him, not ever comprehending that none of this stuff has ever been real. What she's telling him is not real. Both of them are disrupting what I'm building, what I have going on in my life. My life has been completely separate for a very long time. I've been in my own household for a very long time. And what they're doing is destroying and disrupting everything I'm building and everything in my life. And it never clicked for him that that's what he was participating in and that's what she was doing. And also, I believe part of that reason is because she poisoned the food long term. Just like I said, it created like this disconnect, because once I got into my own home and I was eating my own food, then, and it was completely removed, I started functioning like a normal person, and I started functioning even higher, more like a normal person and beyond, because I removed that stuff from ever being entered into my system going forward. But he never did. He was never removed from it the way I was. And he was ingesting the stuff long term. So it was causing his thinking patterns to just follow what she's telling him to do, on top of the way she was scraping the fork on the plate, which I believe is some type of neuro-linguistic programming with the way the words come out of her mouth, and some type of brainwashing tactic with the fork scraping on the plate and the pattern of it, just like in the movie Get Out. Because I've read a lot of books on this while I was incapacitated, learning her behaviors, her malicious behaviors, her criminally insane behaviors, her non-neurotypical behaviors. I was learning a lot about this because I downloaded Audible because I was having a hard time reading because of my brain injuries, but I listened to it on Audible because I was completely laid out for about 3 years, a little over 3 years, completely laid out with my brain sagging and swelling. So I had to spend the whole time laying down. So during that time, I read and listened to all types of books and information regarding all of this. And her behaviors at this time is what was prompting me to be forced to look into all this stuff. So I was able to piece together because of what was going on around me, and because my memories had been coming back, and because of the information I was gathering and the books I was reading and listening to at this time. So she did use my dad long term. He never realized that he was causing all these disruptions. She repeated so many delusions. She just kept making him believe that I wasn't successful, I wasn't who I am, even though he was over here helping me with each home I've owned, watching me produce tons of money all along the way. He thought something I was doing was illegal because of whatever she was telling him. Even though he was here and he saw reality, for some reason, he didn't actually believe reality, and he kept operating on the things she was saying to him. So that absolutely makes no sense. Now, there was time periods where my dad would neurologically flip back to normal, and my daughter would flip back to normal, and they would act normal for a period of time. And the second that they got around her again, where I don't know if she was programming them with some type of word or saying, or what. But the second that they got around her again, it would trigger them to neurologically flip, and they would be brought back here, and they would be both acting a fool, acting crazy, saying all these delusions, causing chaos. And then once there's a period of time where she had no access, they would both be removed, or maybe she wasn't repeating delusions to my dad, or maybe he just didn't see her that much, or I kept trying to make sure he was not running off with my older two kids and bringing them to his house, because this was causing the problems. It was him putting them in front of my mother. And so when they'd be brought back was where this would happen. So then they'd neurologically flip back as if that's not what was going on at all the day prior. And then they'd be okay for a couple days or a week or so. And then all of a sudden, boom, they'd all flip, or it'd be one at a time. Sometimes it would be all of them together. Sometimes it would be one at a time. But this is exactly why she's never been allowed around my youngest son. There's never been a relationship. There's never been contact. It was known from the minute I was pregnant that that's how that was going to go. Now, this had gone on. I'm just giving an example of some of these escapades, but she used him many times. All of the times that she had parties, or she needed to present my kids somewhere to prove to everybody that she had been raising them or had custody of them, that's where she would pump him up full of more delusions and get him to come to my house and snatch my older two kids. And or some of the times, this was before my younger one was born, but she would get him to get my kids in her possession so she could present them wherever they were going. So it made it look like the hundreds of people she's been flapping her jaw to, telling all these delusions to over the phone all these years. It would make it look like her false narrative was true, that she had custody of, she raised these kids. And she's doing this behind my dad's back. She's not having these phone calls in front of him. She's telling all her hundreds of family members, all her hundreds of friends, and every person she knows. And then when there's something going on where she needs them in her possession to show them off somewhere, she would repeat delusions to him, get him to come snatch my kids, and she'd present them without using any words in front of anybody whatsoever. They'd show up, and here they are, and she's presenting them. And it was over her repeating delusions, and none of it was real. What she said to all those people was never real. She just made it appear real to them because they all appeared at whatever situation or whatever party or whatever was going on. She made them appear there, but she repeated all these delusions behind the scenes, and everybody 100% believed her. 100% of the people she knew, I don't know about now today because I've released so many videos, but 100% of the people believed her and what she had been saying, because of the way she was presenting them, getting my dad to get them in her possession because she never had access to me or my homes, and she'd get him to go snatch them, and they'd show up, and it made it look like everything she was saying was real. And she did this repeatedly over the course of the years, and it went on, and he never realized that's what she was telling people behind the scenes. It may have even come out of his mouth that they had custody of, or they raised them or something. I'm not sure, but I do have the police video already up on the Brownstown Police video number 3 from about a year ago, where you see the body cam footage of the cop, and you see my dad telling him my mother's delusions in the video. Those are my mother's delusions that she repeated to him right before we all arrived there. So there's evidence of all this. Like I said, there's text messages, there's different police body cam footages, there's different police reports that she's gotten him to make. She'll repeat delusions to him and then get him to call and make the report, and she'll say, no, don't you remember? She threatened you with the gun. Don't you remember? And so I have a physical report on paper where it's him calling the Brownstown Police Department saying he needs assistance at his house because I'm mentally unstable with the gun. That's her repeating the delusions to him and him calling on her behalf saying that stuff. None of it was ever real. So there's many incidences along the way where there's proof of this. Now, because there's been so many parties and so many places she's made my kids appear, all her family members, including the people closest to her, all fully believe that she's always had custody of and raised my kids, and none of it's ever been real. And it's all over her just making them appear when things are going on, and getting my dad to just come over and snatch them for the day or overnight or whatever. And that's how she pulled all that off all those years. So there's plenty of proof to back this up, that that's what's been going on. And even after his injury, you could tell she was doing this at the care facility during the day, because she's there during the day. When I was there in the evening. When I'd get there, you could tell by the things he was saying to me that she had been there all day repeating delusions to him. And then once she finally fraudulently got me removed for the crimes that she committed and I was blamed for, you could tell that she had went on continuing to repeat delusions to him and everybody else. So the whole false narrative on how I was banned from him, it's all a made-up story. All of it's lies and delusions. I have the proof of all of it. It's just because the police are involved in participating in the crimes that nobody's investigating. but I have all the proof, and I've released a lot of this proof already on my channel. So once I was already banned and I tried to sneak in and see him, or the couple times that I've caught wind of kind of what conversations and what's being said about me, what's going on in the background, because there's numerous people who've been able to get information back to me. It's very obvious that she's been there repeating delusions to my dad and everybody else that I stole this money, I'm this mental disorder drug addict, I'm this hot mess, I did this, I did that, I committed all these crimes, I stole these tools, I did this, I did all these things. Those are all delusions. Those are all lies and delusions. And that's coming out of her mouth. It's going to everybody she knows. It's going into my dad. So even when I went to probate court the numerous times trying to get custody of him and get him away from her, the probate court, when he showed up in the probate court, he's telling them that he feels safe with my mother and there's no problem. It's because she's repeating delusions to him about me. And he doesn't recognize what's actually been going on because he's been programmed for so many decades to say these things, and he's not seeing it as violent because it's not physical violence. It's her putting poison in the food and then repeating delusions, which she had done my dad's entire injury. The amount of time she was putting poison in his food and coming there and repeating delusions and all those rushes back to the hospital. It's all there. There's proof, and there's little trickles of proof and evidence along the way because I left proof in advance. There's all these other little pieces along the way. But all those probate court dates that I had, he was sitting there saying that he feels safe with her and this and that. No, those are delusions that she's repeating to him because she's telling him I'm all these things, that I did all this stuff, stole all this money, did all this stuff. And that's why he's saying those things, because she's sitting there repeating more delusions to him, and she's doing it to all of the care facility employees as well. So all those people they've never seen such a crazy, deranged situation, that they've never seen somebody lie so much and connive so much and cause so many destructive problems and be able to carry this out and act like it's real when none of it's real. That all those care facility workers, they all jumped on board and they've all helped her and they all believe her delusions. And now we're talking 30, 40, 50 people, because they use an agency to get some of their nurses sometimes. Some of them I think maybe work for them, but they also use an agency, and some of them shift in and out. And she repeats all the delusions to their entire staff, everybody in the office, the entire building. So she managed to pull this off every step of the way, literally from the time I was a small child all the way to the current day. And all of this is regarding her gaining access to the missing stolen trust fund, her trying to fraudulently get me arrested numerous times, get me killed numerous times. I will talk about that in the next video, because there's many attempts on my life, and I will go more into detail in that in the next video, basically from the time the trust was left to the current day, and some of the information that I have uncovered and found. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about how she was able to manipulate my dad long term and manipulate all these people and lie to all these people and get the delusions to come out of certain people's mouths. These delusions come out of certain people's mouths. They repeat the delusions for her to other people and agencies on her behalf. And it's still going on to this day. So I just want to talk about how she managed to pull that off, where it all started, and how it grew to where it is today, because this started right after the trust was left in that extreme manner, and it never stopped. And it's the fact that I was on my own all those years with no contact, no relationship, that I didn't really realize that's what had still been going on, that it never stopped. Because I was in such a chaotic flow of my own life. I was extremely busy, and I was accommodating all her escapades and crimes, all the harassment that she was causing from behind the scenes after I'd moved out onto my own, that I was extremely busy for all those years. And it did not dawn on me until my injury, until I was completely laid out and incapacitated at 34 years old, which was in 2018. So I did not figure this out until then, because my life was so chaotic from the time I was 18 to the time I was 34, that I did not fully realize that she kept doing this all along. She was doing this all along behind the scenes, and that's what had been going on all along, and how she was able to carry out all these escapades along the way and get these people to help her and operate on her behalf. It's because she never stopped repeating the delusions to my dad and to all these other people and to my kids. And then to my older kids, because they grew up around it, and especially my daughter, because she spent more time there than my older son did. She's more manipulated than my older son, but they don't see the reality of how serious this is, that these are actually crimes. These are very serious crimes. The degree of what has actually gone on, they don't see the reality of it, because this was programmed into them from the time they were very small. So they don't know a normal life. They never seen anything normal. They are brainwashed to some degree. And I do believe there is a trigger word or two that was used to program all of them. So I will do a video where I show some of the proof of this because it's absolutely absurd. But that is why I tried to get my dad to move in with me in 2019, because I already realized that was when I fully realized what was going on and what was going to happen going forward, which is why I said all that in 2019. And it only took a few years from there, from the time he fell, which I believe the food she left for him in the fridge, it was a bunch of treats that she left for him that he ingested several of leading up to his injury. I do believe it played a role in why he walked off the scissor lift. Now, to this day, I do have a sample of that saved. Um, regarding that incident, I do have that sample. I have 2 samples saved that I do believe are contaminated with something. And that is one of them. I'm 100% sure there's something in it, whatever substance she uses. But that's why I was trying to get him to move in with me, because I knew that this was going to be the end result in some way, shape, or form. And eventually it did happen. So that's where I'm at with things. It got so far out of control that this has controlled and destroyed every aspect of my life, because it's financially wiped me out 3 times down to nothing and a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, and caused me to be permanently injured for the rest of my life, and lose 5 years initially from the time of the initial injury, and 3 extreme years of extreme incapacitation. But I lost 5, and lost some more time down the line after that from my injuries. But permanently injured, forced to live a modified life, never going to have proper quality of life. And I haven't in the last 10 years since the first injury occurred. And that's all due to her crimes and her escapades and what's gone on. So yes, this is why I'm shedding light on all this. People don't realize who she is as a person and what's been going on behind the scenes, and the way she actually behaves when nobody else is around, because she puts on a mask, and that's a fake personality that she shows everybody else. That's not who she truly is. And when she's laughing like a deranged lunatic, it's because she's telling lies and delusions to people, especially when she brings up my name. Anytime my name is mentioned, usually if she mentions my name, it's something that's not real that she's saying about me. 100% of the time. She's never said anything that has to do with any truth about me. She doesn't actually know anything about me, and she's kept this false narrative going all along. So I will be back with more. Thanks. Bye.